Hello, hello. I should rather say happier 2023. Hope it's a good year for everyone. Hope you started the new year on a good note, on a high note. It's definitely going to be a weird year, and I'm starting my weird streams with something iconic. So, iconic Titania. I just want to show you guys the box, which is pretty neat. It has this old school feel to it. It opens up from the bottom, so not the typical way it opens, and you have two miniatures inside and one different card, which is in a slightly different aesthetic. Well, it's in a completely different aesthetic. And as for the model itself, as you can see, it's pretty big. It's a huge model, and I think that the main challenge for the stream tonight will be to make sure I paint it in a way that really does the model justice, because it is indeed a wonderful, wonderful model. It's a multi-part. It's made from, let's see, it's made from, what is it made of? What's the name of the material? It's not the typical plastic that's used for standard Malifaux miniatures. It feels a bit softer, a bit rubbery, but I would say the detail holds up really nice. The great thing about assembling this model is that essentially you can put it together. It will all stay in place without even glue, because the pieces are so nicely matched that they just go together super well. I think some of the branches needed attaching, both legs needed to be attached, and of course the wings. Now, as with all the iconic word models, this one comes with a game-sized equivalent, and that's the game-sized model. As you can see, it's the same. It's exactly the same model. It's not like Sonia, where the large model has this thrall and the regular one just holds a skull. So that's the regular sized model. Now, I haven't made up my mind whether I'm going to use her for Titania 1 or 2. So I created bases which are magnetized, and they give me the flexibility. So if I want to use her as Titania 1, then I will just put her on this base. If I want to use her as titled Titania, then she goes on a 40mm. I just noticed one thing that bothers me. There is something that looks like a mold line here. I might have missed it. Let me just scratch it away, and I will rebase it with pure white just to make sure I'm good to go on this model. And I will compare her to the regular Titania models in a second. Just let me make sure I cover it up. And I pre-shaded it. So I sprayed black, and then Zenithal sprayed white, just to make sure it already has some, hey, under construction paint. So what I also did was that I prepared previous versions of Titania. So this is the first Titania, the original one, if you will. There is an alternative version of that, which is done in a slightly different aesthetics, but I don't have her. I don't own her. I just prefer this model. So that's the old version. Then there is the titled version. This one I painted over a stream a couple of weeks ago. Hey there. Hi, welcome. Good to see you here, mate. Hope things are well in Croatia and all good for you guys there. So those are the two versions that I already have. And here's the third one. So here's this iconic one. I think that scale-wise, they look really good. The titled version is slightly larger because of this base and maybe more elaborate clothing and armor. But the iconic one is something in between. Something in between the two. So my plan for tonight is to paint those two simultaneously, because I thought that it could be interesting to see how the techniques transfer here, right? So how does it make sense to paint those two? I think it does because I will be using exactly the same colors. This one will be, of course, larger, so will take a bit more time. And I don't think I'll be able to finish them both in one stream. So most likely my next stream will be also Titania. So for tonight, the plan is to paint the skin and maybe the wings. With the wings, I'm a bit hesitant because I can approach them two ways. One way is like I did with Titania 1. So those are more, this is the gritty style where I have deep saturated red look framed in dark, almost pure black, which contrasts nicely with pale skin and white clothes and subtle purple magic effect. Then there is the title version, which I think was, maybe I had in mind that it's Molly for Burn, so I wanted to make her wings look, well, like they have some reference to the fire, so they are more vibrant. Different technique used here. Kind of leaning towards this one because I like this dark feel. The base here is made from scratch because I needed something to really hold her better because she's just attached to the base with her tiny feet. So I wanted to make sure there is another point that connects her. So I made this tiny base, and all my Neverborn are swamp themed in terms of basing. Now, I think I will go with skin first, and I will aim for something like I have here. So really pale look because she's undead after all. So I won't be using any purple or red glazes here, just so that there is this feel that there is no really blood going through the veins under the skin. Now, in order to do that, I will start with some very general highlights. Then I will apply purple wash, maybe a touch of green, and it will be all a lot of highlights. Hey there, spilled paint pot. Good seeing you. Now the tricky part about large models, and generally now that I've base coated it, I see a few mold lines that could have been removed because the thing about those is that they do not really work well if you scratch against them, so you need to use the side of your hobby knife and just cut them away. I will rebase it in white, so that's not an issue. It's just different technique that you need to use for removing the mold lines on those large scale models. So I think I will start with the skin, and I also prepared my wet palette. Let's put a bit to the side. The reason I'm using wet palette is that it slows down the drying time of paint. So if I put some paint onto the palette, it will dry much slower because I'm thinking of many thin layers of paint for highlights on this, especially on this larger version of Titania. So that will be helpful in achieving that effect. Now, let's start with Wraithbone. That's what I'll be using. I'll just give it a shake. I'm using my Vortex Shaker for that. I will just apply some of it onto the wet palette, thin it down with water, and that should make the whole process a bit easier. Hobby goals. Hobby goals are good as long as you don't overcommit. As long as they are reasonable, then it's all good. I would be curious to know what the hobby plans are. I think a lot of those hobby plans could be connected with. All right, currently painting my first Malifaux minis. First in 12 years. So my goal is to get back into the hobby, and so far with the Lord, I'm almost thinking, welcome to Malifaux. Slimify D. That's a good approach. Yeah, Malifaux. I mean, there are so many things that you can enjoy about Malifaux, aside from great game mechanics, the rich lore, amazing quality of miniatures, just a lot of things to be enjoyed about the whole Malifaux universe. So welcome. It's a tricky word because it tends to really suck you in. So which models have you chosen as your first models? And great choice for return after 12 years of not hobbying. I'll be curious to learn that. Finish building painting my guild crews, building terrain for very free board, visit the gaming convention. Highly ambitious goals. Highly ambitious. So which guild crews have you picked up? Right now I'm just applying a thin down Ravebone over the whole skin area, trying not to get too much on those leaves and roots surrounding her. I actually started with Guild a couple years ago, and Lady Justice was my first crew back in the first edition days. Dreamer Core. Okay, Dreamer Core. That's Perdita Legion Marshall. Yeah, that's a good choice for Guild, and Dreamer can't go wrong really. Super fun. Actually, Dreamer was the reason I switched to Neverborn because I just loved the aesthetics. Those are I think that a lot of people buy into Malifaux after seeing the Dreamer, the Nightmare keyword. It's got definitely some of the most spectacular miniatures in the whole range. So I'm just being careful not to put too much of it. This is a large scale model, so I'm just being careful and slow with applying thin layer. It's at the moment it's so thin that even the white part of the base coat shines through, which is fine by me. That way it gives me more control. I played it. I actually played a game with Dreamer last week against against Outcasts. It was what's the name of the master? That's of Parker, Deadman Walking, and I brought Lady Yuma for the first time because I thought that she has this amazing willpower targeting attack she can use from 12 inches away. And I lost her in the middle of turn one because turns out Sue is nasty. Sue is an enforcer in Park as it's in the bandit keyword, and he has built-in plus for his attacks with critical strike built in. And Yuma is an enforcer, so even with shielded, he shot her twice for 5 and for 4. She didn't make it past the middle of turn 1. And that was an uphill battle from there. So that was probably my bad positioning and clearly lack of experience in playing Dreamer. You need to be really meticulous about how you position your models, especially turn 1. So you don't want to lose a critical model that you want to use for unburring the summons. Because once you summon them, you kind of facilitate your opponent's game by giving them a pass token. So you need something back, right? And if your miniature is staying buried, if the model that you summoned continues being buried past the turn it was summoned, then probably something is not going well for you. So that was the case for me. That game didn't go too well. But it was a good learning opportunity, and my opponent was super laid back. We had a good chat afterwards. It's a game actually, that game lasted about 90 minutes because at the end of turn 3, I just had 3 Insidious Madness on the board, which wouldn't really. We just thought through how the points score would pan out. There was just no point in going past that point. So you played fourth game yesterday, got completely destroyed. Lady J, Halloween boxes against someone called Rasputina too. No, I had one model in game. Good learning experience. Yeah, ice pillars are no joke, and being wiped out is it's a good learning experience. That's how you should approach it, because when you face a master for the first time, you're bound to have those gotcha moments. You just don't know the synergies, and as a result, a model that just doesn't look scary when you look at face value, all of a sudden is buffed to the point that just wrecks your face. It will happen. So, but next time you face Raspi, you'll be better prepared, and you will be able to have some kind of plan. Rule of cool. Yeah, I mean, Lady J, she's a pretty good master, really. I think you should try the second version as well, because most of the competitive scene sees rather the second version than the first. But the Santa Morata Halloween version is pretty amazing. I will be painting it at some point, that's for sure. Maybe in one of the streams even. So I'm just re-establishing the base color, making sure I get a solid layer of Ravebone, because it's a good basis for further highlights. It's this deeply muted color, which will react nicely with glazes, washes, and some light highlights. The pre-shading I've done, you should be able to see the difference between the highlighted parts and the parts which were in the recessed area, and I see one more mold line. I think those mold lines become more clearly visible once you actually start painting the model. So let me again remove them, repaint them. I would say that the rule of cool is a good rule. Just have to stick to it. And I would say that if you're new into game, into playing the game, then sticking to one master or one keyword is not a bad idea. Because once you get the hang of it, I mean, you should get to the point where you know your crew so well that regardless of which master you face, you have the advantage of knowing your crew inside out. And even if you're caught off guard with some unusual set of skills that the master or the keyword has, you can make the most of what you know about your crew and how you want to use those against the challenges that emerge. That's the way I see it. Just learning by playing, essentially. Okay, so the most of the skin is now base coated. Still some towards the back where I applied a very thin layer. Don't want to go heavy. I'm not sure if this model is available to be purchased. Probably some pre-purchase only. Where it was kind to send it to me, and I received her right after the Christmas, which was a bit delayed Christmas gift, but highly appreciated nonetheless. And my purpose here is to just show you guys how cool this model is and how you can paint her. Oh, this month. So she's out this month. So be on the watch out. Check out your local stores. Check out the Weird store. There are some other cool, iconic models that will be released shortly. probably also this month, like this alternative Lady Justice, which looks like Nicodem, and Iconic Dreamer. And you may see some of them in other word streams. So make sure to stay tuned. If you aren't following the Playword profile on Twitch or Instagram or Facebook, and make sure you start doing so, because that way you won't miss a thing. And there is a lot of happening. There is a lot happening. So not only the iconic models, also the Malifaux Burns, which is a new book that released just recently. And with the release of Malifaux Burns, there are new masters. So now I'll switch to the regular size Titania. So that's the game size iconic version of Titania, and the same process. Thin down paint over all the areas where the skin is. So plenty of it. And I think that a lot of people will be on the watch out for the release of new masters, new crews, new models. I'm definitely looking forward to Castora. I was a bit saddened by the fact that Theory is not the new Neverborn master, because I thought it would be amazing to have a master that's got mechanics that are completely different than all the other Neverborn masters. Especially something that could be potentially more about healing and more about defensive tricks. But we got something interesting. We got Castora, we the Neverborn players, I mean. So Castora Fervent, that is the version, the schemy version. And that's the one that I'm really, really looking forward to painting and playing. At first I thought that Castora, that his range threat is somewhat limited because his attack is, I believe, has the threat range of 8 inches. But then Titania has a threat range of 8 inches. She's mobile by herself, so she doesn't need other models to push her. Just looking at my cat who is lying behind me and snoring loudly. But then Castora has Athorax, so the model that allows him to stay safe, which is something completely new for the Neverborn, because it creates this line through which opponents can't attack. So that allows you to just buff your models, put focus on them, and then safely charge in once they are ready to do serious damage. And the sword, which is something completely new in the game, and this will be an interesting mechanic, that the master has a totem, which is an unkillable sword, magical sword, living blade that can't be killed. The only way to kill the blade is to kill the master. I'll be just going over the large version of Titania just to make sure I don't miss any spots. So yeah, wet palette is probably a good idea when you paint models in larger scale. So what I will do later on with the vines, I will rebase them with very, very light shade, maybe pure white, maybe a slightly off white. And then what I will do is I will paint them with very light green and then tweak it with different glazes and washes. so it won't be a very coherent look. I want this slightly, maybe chaotic nature growth appearance. Sorry for holding it at an awkward angle. Just need to get to the back of her arms, which are close to the wings, so not much point really putting a lot of effort into that part of the model because it won't be visible anyway. So with that, I will start the highlighting process. And I think I will go with some pale colors. Just need to find the right combination of those. Just looking at my shades of white and gray. Okay. I think I like this one. It's called Grimy Gray. I'll mix it with ivory. And I will be applying it. I will be applying it over the skin area as the first highlight. It's actually Grimy Gray is very, very close to Wraithbone. Not sure if it shows, but it's almost the same color. So if I mix in some brighter shade, this should be perfect for first highlight. And there will be plenty of highlights. Now I'll use some Lamian Medium as another way of diluting the paint and making sure it dries slower. Then I will just mix it on the wet palette. Make sure I get the color I'm happy with. And the consistency is right, because I want it super, super thin. And let me just make sure she's in focus. Here is the focus. And what I want to make sure more than anything is to leave a little bit of the previous color showing, just a tiny bit. So I'm using a brush which absorbs a bit more of paint, just to make sure it doesn't dry too fast. And just moving across the whole surface, being very careful to leave some of the previous layer showing, just to make sure that there is this transition from base coat to the highlight. So otherwise it would just, it would look too flat. Let me see if I can adjust the camera to hold it at a different angle. I think this angle is a bit better. So when you work on larger miniatures, in this, especially in larger scale, this is the phase, the stage of painting where seemingly there isn't much progress. Because what's happening is those highlights emerge very, very gradually. And you should just take your time, apply 2-3 thin coats of paint to get this smooth transition. And that's why I chose 2 models to paint simultaneously, because that way I will switch to the smaller version while the paint on the larger version continues to dry. So that's the first model that I will be. That's I think that yeah, the first model for 2023. Sorry. Sorry for that. I had some models that were partly painted. Well, I just added some finishing touches, and I need to upload the pictures to the Word forums to Painters Challenge. Just forgot to do that. The same applies to the back. So just going around the model, making sure I repeat all the raised areas. That's an unhealthy looking shade of skin. Now back to the smaller one. The same strategy, only the brush strokes will be a bit different. And it just feels so tiny when I switch between the two. It's just funny feeling. I think that after the skin I will paint the hair just to have the center of the miniature complete. And then I will move either to the base or to the wings. And normally on the first Tuesday of the month you would see Eleanor, but we swapped. Sometimes we do that. It's because I typically take the second and the fourth Tuesday, and she takes the first and the third. Sometimes, personal things or work or just life gets in the way, and we just swap slots for paint streams. So she will be with you guys next week this time. No, she streams actually earlier. So it will be her regular painting time, but next week. Now I'm going to work on keeping the mix a bit brighter. So I'll add a few drops of ivory to the mix and maybe a touch of huh. That seems like a good doppelganger theory. And come to think of it, no, we've never been at the same place. Who knows? We just need to go to the same tournament or the same convention just to prove people that we're a different person. But we have different painting styles, quite different painting styles, I dare say. But it's a learned thing. You can also always learn to imitate something, can't you? Completely different styles. But it's one of the things that I enjoy about. So there comes the paler highlight. It's one of the many things I really enjoy about painting stream is that you get to really see completely different painting styles, even on the same miniature. Continuing with the smooth highlights, transitioning from grayish pale to whitish pale skin tone, and taking my time, taking my sweet time. So it's half an hour of painting, and it doesn't look like I've achieved much, but it's happening. It is happening. The colors are Slowly the details are beginning to emerge. And I'm definitely going to need at least 2 painting streams to finish this model. These models, I should say. And always really need to be careful not to overdo it, just to make sure that at least some of the previous layer is showing. Now, as for my hobby resolutions for 2023, I don't have any really. I gave up on that a few years ago. Just life is so unpredictable, especially with busy family time, kids, work. So I don't have any plans. I just want to continue painting, making sure I have time to land a few brush strokes on give or take daily basis, because that's the fun of it. Fun fact, like a couple of months ago now, I sold my PlayStation 5 because I finished the one game that I wanted, well, 2 games that I wanted to finish, which were Demon Souls and Elden Ring. And after completing the games, it's been sitting there and I haven't even started it. I haven't even used it at all for a couple of months. So I thought, why should I hold on to it? And besides, game playing video games interfered with my painting time, and I'm just more productive. I mean, nothing against video gaming. It's a cool hobby, time consuming, but so is painting. But at the end of the day, I just have to own it to myself that I just don't have time to do both, and I enjoy painting more. So I'm sticking to that. So just to give you an idea of the kind of consistency, here is my thumbnail, and as you can see, the paint is kind of semi-transparent, very thin consistency. I could probably achieve the same effect that I've been working on for past 30 minutes with 5 minutes of skilled airbrush work, but I'm not a skilled airbrush user. Okay, time for a bit more definitive highlights. So I'll just use pure ivory, which is the super bright shade of. It's not pure white, it's a bit off, as the name says, ivory. And I will go with some light overbrush. So using brush with thick bristle, what I do is I load it with paint and then move it on the dry tissue just to make sure that all the bristles catch some paint, that it's spread evenly there. And I will just use it to place a bit more bold highlights, especially on face. And then there will be glazes, washes, and highlights. So that's the plan for the next, give or take, 60 minutes. Some slow brush work. I'm definitely not going to hurry. I think that the face details are absolutely superb here. Not sure what the name of the material is, but holds that detail level really, really, really nicely. Just again making sure that previous layer is at least partly visible. And then there will be glazing time. And I may need to bring hair dryer for that, just to speed up the drying process. But we'll see. I can always switch between one model to another. So I'm going to play in the tournament next month, February 4th. Looks like it might be the biggest tournament in Poland we've had in a few years, with almost 20 people who put the names to the list so far, which will be fun. And I'm definitely going to put Titania on the table at least once. Because both versions they play differently. They play in a completely different way. But both are really fun to use. So now I'll prepare a mix, and for that I will use an old 30mm base. Let me just grab one out of the box. There is a box with bases. There is a base. I keep all the plastic bases because you never know what kind of use you can have for them. So I'll mix Carborg Crimson with a bit of Raycon Flash Shade to add a little bit of warmth. Just give them a good shake. I'm not going to mix it on wet palette because it will just flow over the whole thing. And I want a pretty thin. I'll even take away part of it, absorb it on a tissue. Also drop of brown, it's brownish shade, and quite a lot of lamine medium to that. 3, maybe even 4 drops. Now mix it well. And I will test the opacity. So you can see it barely. Look at my fingernail. It barely makes an impact. Just tints it, very slightly tints it. So that's the idea of glaze, where it isn't immediately impactful. So it adds this kind of rosy, slightly purplish filter to the surface, which I highlighted beforehand. The consistency is very thin, that way it flows nicely into all the recessed areas. Now to the back, and it very nicely marks all those leaves and brambles on her. And also you want to move rather fast here just to make sure that that it doesn't pull, because if it dries when you apply too much of it in one place, you lose this smooth transition that we've been working on for a while here. Because if it dries in larger quantity, it holds a darker, significantly darker color. And I don't want that. That's not the reason I've been putting those meticulous highlights. Now the larger one, this will be fun. I'll start with the arms. See, that's the advantage of painting two miniatures at the same time, because while I'm brushing, while I'm landing some brush strokes here, the other one is already drying. And this one will take a bit more time. Now, awkward angle wording. Need to get to the bottom. Now the face. So the face looks currently like a mannequin, but let's add some depth to it. Well, hopefully you can see it, but it makes immediate impact. Just want to move away. If there's too much, I think I will add some green glazes as well, because it's an undead character. So normally if it was a human character, I would have a more rosy, more vibrant skin tone. Here I'm aiming for a really, really pale look. Again, applying a bit too much of it, but moving quickly to make sure that it doesn't pool and it doesn't start drying in the pool. The same on the stomach. Again, applying a glaze and immediately spreading it on the surface, not allowing it to stay pulled in one place. That will help with enhancing the base color that we've applied. So quite different to what I typically do, but different scale demands different techniques. And it's as simple as that. You cannot just use the same technique and expect the same results. That is already looking much, much more interesting. And the thing about glazes is that you can apply a few layers of them. And you can apply one, let's say, over the whole skin surface, just to tint it, kind of filter it. And then you can start modifying the depth of that filter, how dark or how bright you want it to be, by waiting for it to dry and then applying another coat of glaze on the same area. Okay, let's wait for it. Let's give it some time to dry. and I will show you a close-up of what's been achieved so far. So it's almost an hour of painting, and we have this pale looking skin tone. And the eye sockets will be just dark and hollow, because she was blinded. Now I'm going to use the same color, and once again just glaze more towards those recessed areas. So the inner thighs, the neck, maybe a bit more on the cheeks. Some more on the back. Back to the big lady. I mean, it's the same lady, but back to the larger version. Just want to make sure it's dry, so I'll start pushing a bit more depth into the areas which I started with the last time. So a bit more on the hand, maybe getting a bit darker from below, which is the shaded area, so that the muscles and part of the forearm, which is directed towards the front, remains a bit brighter. So I'm using the same place, and this creates this transition where the upper part is brighter and the lower becomes darker, and the transition between the two is super smooth. The same on the back. And now let's move to the face. I mean, if you haven't ever painted miniature in larger scale, then you should do it, because it's such a vastly different experience to painting in regular scale. It really forces you to, well, maybe not up your game, but adjust your painting skill set, which is great. Okay, and this area will be a bit darker, whereas the upper area of her chest will be a bit brighter. Same here, inner thigh, getting some darker shade. The more I work on this model, the more I really appreciate the talent of the person who designed it. And then I will be bringing back the details by placing some more highlights. So it's a different game, slower game for sure. Right now it's getting a little bit too rosy compared to what I had in mind, so I will start tweaking it with light touch of green in a second. And that green will go well together with the base. Actually, the skin is by far the most difficult part of the miniature. Now, let's switch back to the smaller version. Make sure I didn't miss a spot there. And I think I will use a touch of green. And for that I will use military green, which is this darker shade of green. And while it's drying, let me just refill my yerba. Something nice and healthy to keep my mind sharp and awake. And it's not that late, it's 10 p.m. here, local time. So I wouldn't call it late yet. And I'm using the same base for the mix. Just adding some green to it. Maybe even more pronounced. One more drop of green shade to that. Now that's a bit of a darker shade. Not very dark, but darker for sure. And I will use it to push more shades into the recessed areas. Not sure why, but in my screen the quality of video on the Twitch has decreased significantly, and the frame rate seems to be down. Hope it's just temporary. So I'm just trying to focus on those areas which should be darker on her skin. Like the lower thigh. The whole area on the back should be darker. And the big lady. Keep on referring to her as the big lady, but it's the same lady. And again, I'll move from the bottom. So it's all about smooth highlights. And those highlights are created by me working on shades currently. So pushing more shade into the recessed areas of the face. I mean, the changes are really, really subtle. Even I'm holding the miniature right in front of me and I can barely see them, but I can see them. But that's the whole point. It's not about speed painting, it's about gradually building up this transition. And more than anything, it's about enjoying the process. Because here I'm with you guys for 3 hours and I'm fully committed to painting, sharing, and discussing all the hobby aspects as I continue working on the amazing miniature. Normally, if I felt that okay, I need a break, I would just stand up, stretch out, make myself something to drink, maybe take a walk, or just do something else just to get away from the painting table for a while. Because sometimes it's needed. So continuing to push this greenish shade towards the back area. Again, the back can be darker. I'm perfectly fine keeping it darker. Just making sure that the coats are thin and distributed layer after layer. No rushing things. And at the same time, while when I'm as I'm working on those darker shades, I can already start outlining the vines on her body because the skin surrounding them could be also a bit darker. So if I work on pushing towards more of a darker outline around them, that will help me later on. And I don't know yet what I will do with this model. The previous iconic model that I painted in a weird stream, which was the iconic Sonia, I've had it in my wardrobe for a couple of months. And then in December, there was a charity tournament in my local area in Warsaw. So I donated it to charity auction and it's got a new home now, which I think is great because it feels good to be able to chip in to those in need while doing something that you just enjoy and that relaxes you. So the same may happen to this model one day when there's another charity event. I may put her for charity auction. But I'll see. Maybe I will like her so much that I will hold on to her for a little longer. Well, maybe we can make it an international event. I mean, in terms of charity raffle. I mean, it's not a raffle. It was just an auction where you could just place your bid, and it was. I think it was this part of the auction was conducted via Polish Discord, Polish official Malifaux. I mean, unofficial Polish Malifaux Discord, and people could just place their bids there. And actually, the guy who won works very close to where I do, so I was even able to deliver the miniature personally. So it's slowly starting to take shape. And guys, even though the transitions between colors aren't that impactful now, they are already starting to pop slowly. I'm just on her shoulders. I think those are leaves again. So I'm using this thinned down greenish wash around those plants on her body. I mean, those veins or vines, I think it's the proper word, not veins, but vines. Same on her breasts. Also, I will give it a bit of a darker outline so that where the leaves meet the skin, there will be this slightly darker transition. But it's fun. It's really fun. I mean, if I was just painting the smaller version, I would probably already have the face painted, all the details there. But I definitely don't mind taking a slower approach this time around. Again, super smooth highlights. That's the name of the game today. Smooth and slow. That's the name of the game. And guys, I think you're in for a treat tomorrow. I believe tomorrow is haunted. Haunted? Is it haunted or dark? I think it's no, it's haunted. It's haunted, and I'm not going to spoil it. You will see tomorrow what he brings, but he will be working on something that is also new, that is also getting released now, and this will be fun to watch. I am definitely joining at least some parts of the stream tomorrow as well, just to pop in, say hi, and see how Haunted is doing with what he is working on. I mean, I would be jealous if I wasn't working on something amazing already today. So, not jealous, just happy that my fellow painter gets to work on something amazing too. Right, now back to the regular sized one. And time to push a bit more shades here. Then I will put a little bit of highlight, and then I will go with super thin purple glaze. Because that's more or less what I did for this lady. And that resulted in this pale skin tone. You can see plenty of dots on the piece of paper which I hold next to my wet palette. The purpose is just that I can quickly test if the color or the consistency is right. Now a bit more of this dark green. This time a bit of a heavier glaze. By heavier, this is what I mean. We put it on the fingernail. You see it's becoming immediately darker. So time to darken it up a little bit. Yeah. Slow process, but fun process nonetheless. Now a bit more of darker shade on the iconic version. So her lower jaw, some more on the cheekbones, maybe even a little bit more around the nose area. She's beginning to look a bit more like this fey creature that she should be, like this dryad vampiric creature. Too much removal. So those thin glazes allow me to make quick adjustments if needed, which is something I really appreciate about this technique because it's in that way it's a bit more forgiving than applying paints. I saw this model painted by Angel Giraldes and it looked fabulous because I mean, let's face it, anything that Angel Giraldes paints looks fabulous, looks absolutely amazing. But that's not the way I will paint her because his was quite vibrant. Those all those greens were really popping up vibrantly, and it obviously it looks great. But I'm going just to do something different. I'm going to do it my way. Not that I would be able to replicate the kind of quality that Mr. Giraldes brings to the table, and I have nothing but respect for his work. It's just that I want to do things differently. Some more green towards the back. And again, I will be using this opportunity to slightly darken the vines and the area and the skin around them, just to kind of prepare it for the work that's coming up. And we're slowly approaching the middle of the stream, halfway through the stream, but definitely not halfway through painting this miniature. Quite far from it. I would say maybe 25%, maybe less. Because what I'm going to do now is I will use the color that I still have on my wet palette, maybe thin it down again. And I will just place a few highlights. Now those highlights are really, really noticeable. So I need to be careful and keep the consistency thin. Because nice and easy, slow is the name of the game tonight. Not rushing it. And I may need to switch to smaller brush. Because I actually like working on, might seem counterintuitive, but I like working sometimes on those smaller details with slightly larger brushes, because the reason is that they hold paint nicely and the paint doesn't dry too fast, which allows me to have more control of the brushwork and apply those highlights, those smooth highlights, in a more controlled manner. Now the bit trickier part, the larger version. So just kind of bringing the paint towards those raised areas. Easy does it. Nice and slow. I think our next step will be a super thin down glaze of purple, just to kind of filter it and give it more of this, less of this green and more of this undead look. And then I will cut back to repicking those details. Really like the way that the sculpt of the miniature. I think that that's the version of Titania that kind of exudes the most confidence. It's like the queen coming back to power. I think that's the iconic moment caught here. Just looking at all those feathers makes my head spin. Just there will be a lot of work here, but that's perfectly fine. That highlight went a bit too far, so we need to smoothen it. Now again, holding the miniature at a different angle to make sure I use the natural light I have. I mean the artificial light, but it is a kind of reference, point of reference. It serves as a good guidance to help me map where the brightest elements on the skin should be, like the collarbone here, which I just wouldn't be able to notice from different if I looked at it from different angle. Now back to the smaller one. And this is where using the wet palette comes in really handy, because I can use roughly the same colors that I've used for initial highlights before I started applying the glazes, and have a more coherent look, more, I would say, even organic look. I think organic is a good word. So now while I wait for it to dry, because I want to make sure that the paint is fully dry before I apply the glaze, I can actually do the hair. So I'll start with just black Templar. Her hair is really, really dark black. And I'll just apply it directly. Some shade will be created, some shading will occur naturally due to the pre-shading. The fact that I base coated the miniature in black and then sprayed white for zenithal highlights. I may switch to a slightly smaller brush in a second. I will need to even do that. But having the hair outlined in black will give me a good idea of how the other colors work together. I'm definitely going to need to switch to a smaller brush to make sure I don't mess the details here. So this one, size 1, should be good enough. There is a strand of hair here. Those are not vines. This is a strand of hair. See, I just made a small mistake and was able to kind of blend that mistake in with the rest of the overall composition, which is great advantage of working with acrylic paints or acrylic based products in general. So I was earlier on I was talking about playing Titania. I think she's maybe the easiest Neverborn master to play, especially the first version. She's a beater. She's a highly mobile, pretty resilient beater, so quite forgiving. The tricky part about her is that in current game setup, she just doesn't work that well with her keyboard. So she tends to bring to the game like those big hitters, the versatile models, rather than relying on her keyboard solely. So highly mobile, good damage output. Technically, she can have, all things considered, she can have like 5 attacks per turn if she's positioned well. She can move those underbrush markers and ping twice for 1 damage, which doesn't seem like much, but when you're facing armored opponents, each ping hurts them a lot. In one game, I was able to kill a peacekeeper, and that's a notoriously tough model to put down in one activation of Titania. 2 pings, 1 red joker for damage helped a lot, but yeah, she can deal serious damage. She can dish out some damage. And what I like also is the mobility and resilience. So when I play her, I typically take. I don't think I've ever played her without Emissar, without the mysterious emissary model, which might have as well have Faye stapled onto the card because he just works so well with all those markers that are placed there. Because if an opponent is sitting in severe terrain, then they're on a minus flip when they defend against mysterious emissaries attacks, which is huge because that allows him to place a number of hungry land hazardous markers, which just make life of models standing in them a misery. So the hair will be outlined in a second on both versions. Just being careful not to put black on the wings. I think the wings will be dark red, but I'll get to them later. Maybe not even today. Today I want to focus on the skin, and then I'll see what comes to my mind as the best idea for continuing next. Now the back of her hair is a bit awkward to get to because of the way her wings are positioned, and while it can be bent slightly, don't want to overdo it. I don't want to damage the model. All I want is just black base coat there. Nothing else. This is the part of the model that won't be really visible, so I'm not too concerned about it. Now this strand of her here. So the thing about Titania is that she's not super complex. her games are fast, her activations are impactful, and it's just a pain train. Especially if you can isolate the target. If the target is sitting in hazardous markers next to her underbrush markers, she can just suplex them between the two and cause additional damage. Then she has life leech, so plenty of opportunities to hit with different types of ping damage. There she is. Her face is now nicely framed with those wonderful hair. Just pause for a second. So pale skin, dark hair. I'll just make sure that the miniature is fully dry before I apply highlights, before I apply the next glaze. I think I'll do the green parts next, or at least outline them. And I'll just, I think I missed a few spots here as well. Now time for purple wash. And for purple wash, unfortunately, it seems like I might have run out of purple wash, so I'll use something else. I will use Vallejo Deep Purple, or maybe a contrast paint, and thin it down considerably. That's what I'll do. I think this one will do. And I will turn it upside down, and I have another place to create glazes. So just a little bit, and a few dots. And maybe I will even add a bit more of different contrast paint. I'll add Volupus Pink. Oh, that's still way too thick. Way too impactful. So I'll absorb most of it in a tissue and make another glaze. Because it should be just tinting, not painting. That's better. That's what I meant. And again, nail test, fingernail test. You see, it barely makes an impact. That's the idea of glaze. And I can apply it multiple times, because then it just filters. It doesn't really make a significant change to the appearance. It's more about saturating it. And I can actually even follow up with a blue. Wouldn't that be crazy? Just a blue one, just to add to this undead look. But now let's put it on the iconic version. On the larger iconic version, it really nicely highlights all the meticulous highlights that have been placed on the miniature. And again, I'm being careful not to allow the paint to pool in any areas, just to spread it before that happens and make sure that it can be prevented. And the nice thing about applying glazes like that is that you apply them very thinly. This is more really water than anything else, and you can apply a few layers of it just to further enhance the effect that you're after. Here I would just need to wait a second for it to dry before I can apply another glaze. And while I'm waiting, I will slightly fix the back because there is a bit too much of skin showing and I want it a bit darker. That's more like I want it. And the same here on the back of her arms. Just using this opportunity to add some extra shade there. Same from the bottom. Now her navel became visible again because it was kind of lost after the previous highlight. Now I need to think about how do I paint. Well, now I feel flattered, but thank you. Now think after I've painted all the green elements, might as well give some green glazes to her. That will have to wait. Now I'll just use the skin tone, which is still not fully dry on the wet palette. Just add a bit of water and repick those raised areas like her cheekbones. Kind of redefine it. Let's see. Make sure that the consistency is super thin. I check it by dragging the tip of the brush on the piece of paper. And it's also a good moment to fine tune those highlights. You want this kind of thin consistency that allows you to make the kind of border between highlights and shaded areas super smooth so that no brush strokes whatsoever are visible. You don't want your brush strokes visible on the miniature, especially this scale. I need to let my cat out. There he goes. Probably had a nap of sleep. It's amazing that cats can sleep up to 16 hours per day. That sounds amazing. But looking at my cat, I think it can be an understatement. Well, he's an older guy, so he needs his quality sleep. A bit more shade here, below the nose, and a bit more around the eyes. Because her eyes will be black and hollow. So we'll work on pushing maybe a bit more of a purple shade below them, so it looks like kind of magical makeup. The eye sockets will be black anyway. I will also repeat some raised areas on the smaller version. This is such a small one compared to this large iconic version that what I'm doing now feels like just putting in some tiny dots. Now maybe her lips. I'm hesitating between dark green and dark purple. I think I will just go with Purple Alchemy, which is express color, so similar to what contrast paints does, but it's this kind of pink which is super dark and should nicely work on those pale surroundings. There we go, that's her lip marked. And I will highlight it in a second. So when I'm painting lips, I just paint the lower lip. And then using the base color, I just add a little bit of skin tone, which I have handy on my wet palette, and highlight it. Can even go brighter than that. Okay, I think I could add now maybe even a blue wash, a very not a wash, a glaze, a blue glaze. Let me just take one more 30mm base. This one will do. Hasn't been used for any paints before because blue is such a cold color. And it should work well for what I have in mind. Maybe this blue. As you can see, I'm just adding a very small amount of it, tiny amount of blue, and to that I will add a few drops of lime and medium. All right, and now I have the mix that I want, and I will use it maybe selectively on some areas. Just place it, some of it here, not on the whole surface. I don't want it on all of it, but this will give this nice pale tint to the skin, just to be more evocative, bearing in mind that she's an undead character. So super delicate, not impactful at all. Typically you see me going pretty heavy with different types of washes. Now this is more about really adding subtlety. This really pushes this undead feel. I will slightly reinforce it from the bottom as well. So what I mean by tinting here is that you shouldn't look at the miniature and say, wow, it's a blue miniature now. No, it should have just those hints of blue, tiny hints of blue. Which makes her look super pale. And I think that with that, I am ready to move on to next stage, which will be adding some green. About time, because we are approaching the end of the second hour of the stream. Let me just position her in a stable position. Put her in a stable position so that you guys can see what's happening here. Well, not the most optimal. Now it's better. And I just saw a tiny dot of white, which I don't like. And I'll use this opportunity to refill my yerba. Oh, and we have the freshest follower, Mikal Chep. Welcome. Welcome to the weird stream. Okay, I'll just put aside the paints which I'm not currently using. And let's put some green. Let's bring some green to the table. So I'll use light green for now. Which will be this Blackbearer flesh. So I'm not painting wings today. No, I will just focus on the greens, maybe browns. There are also some bones in the base. So actually, you know what? Speaking of bones, let me do the skulls first. There are a couple of skulls on the base. So I'll just make sure that I reinforce them a little bit with very light. And again, I'm using the same color which was used as a skin tone. And that way I keep the whole composition more under control. Because those are the colors which will correspond with what we have above the base, with the lady herself. There are a couple of skulls actually. And this looks like some more bones. So let me just repick all those bones which are partly grown into the base. It's like she's emerging from her prison and just some nasty stuff is coming out with her as well. Those look like ribs. I think those will be all the skulls on the base, so I'll just put one more highlight on them and then I can give them a quick glaze of light brown. Because if I put too much of green around them, I would lose track of where those bones should be. I'll do the same on the smaller version. So just make sure. And I can use the larger one for reference here. It's a neat point of reference. So the details are not, obviously, not as pronounced on the smaller one, given the size difference, but still clearly there. Okay, there's that. I think this looks like bones as well. And this looks like a bone. And there is another skull. Yeah, I need to paint this bone here as well. Hey there. Well, thank you. Glad you like it. Well, I've started with just base coated miniature, so it's been almost 2 hours. A little less than 2 hours. This is all well documented in the stream, and the neat thing about those word streams, painting streams, is that everything is then uploaded to the YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to Play Word on YouTube, and that way you will see all of those videos pop up there as well. Plenty of good stuff. There are 4 word painters, each has a different style, different way to talking and interacting with the audience during the stream. So it's some nice variety there. Now I will just glaze some, or actually I will just put a skeleton horde contrast paint. Using the vortex shaker to really give it a good shake before I apply it. And I think those hints of blue really did a lot here. Oh, in years. In years. I've been painting for more than 20 years. So quite a lot of painting, and just Malifaux I've painted more than 1,000 Malifaux miniatures, and I've painted a lot of miniatures from other gaming systems. Before Malifaux, I was mainly painting Lord of the Rings, Hobbit miniatures, doing commissions, painting for collectors, painting some for myself, and painting some Warzone, some War Machine before that. But for the past couple of years, like 5, 6 past years, it's been 90% Malifaux. But it's I don't consider myself a great painter, especially when you look on social media and see other painters. It's easy to get humbled, but I just love this aspect of the hobby. I mean, Malifaux is a well-designed game with amazing card mechanics. The card flipping is just a phenomenal idea from design standpoint. But I would lie if I said that gaming is my favorite aspect. More about painting. So the skulls are outlined. Okay, now there is those ribs locked in here, as trapped in the tree here as well. Now I'll be adding some green, finally. But thanks for sticking for so long. It really appreciate it that you stuck from the beginning of the stream. Now I'll be painting directly from the pot, and I'll be applying it on all those green elements. Let's see how it works. I think it's not very impactful, but that's fine. That is very, very good. I don't want it to go super heavy. I want to make sure that I can still fine tune it later on with darker green if needed. So actually, now looking at the timing, there is still 1 hour to go. I'm full of yerba mate, so full of energy to carry me through the last hour of the stream. Yerba mate, that's something that Leo Messi drinks apparently. So there's got to be something good to it. It's like coffee. It's full of caffeine, but doesn't dehydrate you like coffee. So it doesn't make you thirsty. So I'm not going to make it easy for you guys to follow. I'll do a lot of voiceover of what I'm doing because I need to just make sure that there is one thin layer of this light, slightly yellowish green on all those vines. And from there, I will be able to decide how dark or how bright I want to keep it, bearing in mind that the overall composition should be rather gritty. Well, thank you. I'm really humbled by what you've written. That's that's some high praise there. Thank you so much. Really appreciate those generous comments. I think that as I said, I don't consider myself a great painter, a superb painter. I think that a lot of it comes down to the control of the brush, and painting all those hundreds of miniatures has given me that, so that I can quite firmly navigate the brush across the surface of the miniature. And that's just either you have it from the get-go, or it's something that you just develop over years. And for me, it was clearly developed over years. And once I had the pleasure of joining a workshop with one of the best Polish miniature painters who actually won some Golden Demon awards, and that guy was just on a different level. That's why I said I consider myself a good, solid painter with nicely developed skills. But the kind of skill that I saw from the guy who was running the workshop was just next level, which is good. I mean, that's always good to have people who are much better than you to kind of allow you to grow and push in that direction if you feel like you want to develop. Besides, nowadays, you can just find so much on the internet, and those streams are a good example. If you follow you are painting Dreamer. So I would say that if you're into Dreamer, then make sure you tune in for the stream tomorrow because the content of the stream, you will find them interesting if you like Dreamer. And I'm stopping here. I'm not saying what's actually going to be shown. You will find if you're in the US, so it's 3 p.m. Georgia time. If you're in Europe, it's 9 p.m. Central European time. Okay, so more of the green is outlined. And Black Burrow Flash is one of my absolute favorites because it's green, but it's a versatile color because you can go dark or bright from it. Doesn't limit you. If I applied heavy green here, I would be locked into painting dark green. But this just gives me more versatility, or maybe flexibility is the right word. I think I will paint a whole tree trunk with this bright green because then I can tweak it to brown, I can tweak it to different shades of green, maybe even some red in there. I'm not definitely the kind of painter that has a plan from the get-go. I tend to fine-tune it as I continue the process. Just having an open mind. Well, but all that being said, just have to admit that painting word miniatures. I mean, I'm a fanboy. That's a fact. So I'm going to say all the good things about word miniatures, but it's just a thing that I found personally my niche because I just really like the creative direction the company has taken, and the design of the miniatures just speaks to me in a way that's very encouraging to continue painting them. Okay, there it is. Some hints of green. The card mechanics in the game is just phenomenal. I mean, that's the cool thing about this game is that especially when you play at the tournament level, each turn brings excitement because it's exciting to find out how your initial hand is going to look like. And that excitement can turn into disappointment, certainly. But that's just part of the game. And you have ways of mitigating that, and then you can play the game on so many levels. Because there are masters, even in Neverborn. I mean, the Dreamer second version is all about card manipulation, but let's say Zoraida, both versions, um, allows you to draw a second hand initially and exchange your hand with what you started the turn with. And that's just one aspect of the gameplay, the hand control. There are just so many things to keep track of in the game that it's not easy to get into the game. That's why I always recommend just sticking to one crew or one keyword and just learning it inside out. So I'm just going to apply this light green on the whole base. This will maybe I should switch to a larger brush, although I like this one because it gives me a lot of control of where I place the contrast paint. And then I need to repeat the process on the smaller one. And the funny thing is that I'm using the same paint on the base or on the tree trunk. It's not really a base. And on those vines on her body. And the part on her body, due to the fact that it got some of the different colors, it's more brown than green, which is good because it feels very organic. It's fantastic. I think that really separates great players from good, decent players. Is that, and I'm definitely not a great player, Because is that when I get a hand at the beginning of the turn which just sucks, which is awful, because there are no severes in it, then of course you can think creatively about ways in which you can generate pluses, put focus just to rely more heavily on positive flips when you know that you cannot add value from your hand. But the great players will still plan around it. And actually, I think that the definition of a great player is that a great player, and there are a couple of really great players in my local meta, will tell you at the beginning of the turn, your master is getting executed by my executioner or another model this turn. And they do it. Even if you know that they plan to do it, they do it. And that's some bold power play that great players can do. I've been on the receiving end of such threat and had my Titania executed. So yeah, that happened to me. And also speaking of richness of resources on the internet, Vassal is a good place to learn about the game. I mean, you can watch so many recorded games on YouTube that definitely there are some dreamer games. And I think that the most, for me, the most interesting part is the unpack phase, how people really start their turns with master, what kind of actions they take to capitalize on the circumstances. Do they just do concentrate one move, or how do they really unfold before they move up the board? I think I'll need some kind of a plinth for this model, just to have it properly showcased. I made this highly elaborate base on my Sonya iconic model a couple of months ago, which was painting that was because there was like a mosaic pattern and it was like painstakingly slow. I think I painted it offline, not in a stream. So not going to go this direction here. Probably will just do some black plinth. Doesn't look exciting now when it's just. Oh yeah, thank you. That's the link to what Vassal is. Doesn't look exciting, but as I said before, this is a very, very light shade of green, which allows me to be quite flexible. There are some flowers here which I will need to bring back to base white color before I apply some glazes on them, but that's okay. For now, all I care about is just having this large area blocked, and the fact that I pre-shaded it makes it look like those contrast paints really, really catch on nicely on those pre-shaded. By pre-shaded, I mean just sprayed with black base coat first, and then very lightly or very lightly with white sprayed from at an angle, so that the black or the dark base coat is still partly visible. Yeah, go for it. I mean, coaxing friends into the system is a good way of helping build community and find local community because the best way to really learn the game is just to play it. I mean, it sounds like the obvious, right? But there's just no better way than learn it. No better way to learn it than by actually playing it. So here is the base, well, the tree part, just base coated with green. It will evolve because it will be partly black, partly brown, partly green, but for now it's just green. Now I will switch, before I actually switch to the regular side version, I will just paint the hollow eyes and I will just paint them with pure black. So there is my green black. I'll just switch to tiny brush. Should don't need that tiny. I just need a good tip of the brush. So I'm using size. What's the size of this one? It's not a small one for sure, but it's got a very good tip. Just want to make sure that those eyes are properly hollow. That makes it easier, right? Because I don't need to paint the proper eye. Okay, this is the eye. For every interaction I've had in the Malifu community has been really positive. From right to Discord to here, it's also this here. Yes, a lot of good things can be said about community. It's really amazing, and there are so many content creators. You've made it to Discord, so you don't need any more recommendations because it's all there. There is a section with content creators, and you have just a couple of things per week. People just make their own podcasts, battle reports, well, you name it, you'll find it. So hollow eyes on her as well. Now, some green on this lady. Is this one? I don't know if I can put her in a more favorable angle, at a more favorable angle. Don't think so. I mean, it's a large miniature, so hard to really get a great angle on that. I think I just need to retweak one thing here. Just to make sure those cheekbones are nicely highlighted. So back to the small one. And the community has been really, really impressive for me since I joined. It's very welcoming. You don't feel like a nuisance when you ask beginners question. So it's a bit faster because it's smaller surface here, but it's essentially the same thing I've done on the larger one. So I reckon it made sense to put them both in one stream. It would be interesting to see them next to one another when they're done. Well, clearly the detail is more pronounced on the larger one because just by the nature of scale it has to be this way. And I was going to ask you, Slimify, which part of the world are you from? Are you US based or based in Europe? Just just asking out of curiosity, just to maybe give you some specific meta recommendations if I'm familiar with some of your local people. UK based. Well, so Malifaux stands very strong in the UK. I actually believe that the Polish guy is the current reigning Malifaux champion there. But Malifaux looks pretty strong in the UK. The the community is quite big. I mean, if you can have nationals with what was it, around 100 people, I believe, or more, then wherever you are, you'll find someone to play the game with. See how much faster it is on this smaller miniature? It's just seems like it took me 3 times as much time to get to where I'm at with this one. And I'm just repeating the steps. So approaching the final 30 minutes, but looking pretty good. I At this point I'm hesitating because I may actually just base coat the wings with red at this point, just to have some base work done. That seems like a reasonable idea, because then I could just, when I tweak the colors, I can look at it holistically, just not sections of the model, both the small scale and the large scale, but rather as a whole piece and how colors interact with one another. I tend to use color wheel a lot for reference. So, for example, when I know that there is a lot of green, then the counterweight to that would be red and violet. And I can already go creative with color schemes. I mean, there is nothing wrong in keeping a more unified color scheme, so using just more shades of the same color. I think that just adding contrastive colors makes those, well, does justice to those highly dynamic sculpts of the miniatures. Yeah, that's super handy. You can find just a color wheel reference online. There are some tutorials, but basically what I do is just, when I look at color schemes, I just look at how colors interact with one another. So just to give you an example, here is this second version Titania, where I have red and green, and they work kind of against one another, but that way those wings really pop. It's just one way of using the color wheel. You can deep dive more online and see more elaborate explanations of how it works, but to me that's the key reference point. I mean, I've been using it for years, so I probably know those color connections by heart at this point, but still good to have it handy and just double check that, yeah, those colors click, those don't. All right, so that's the small one. I think why not go for the wings? See no reason why I shouldn't do it. Because I already know that the wings will be red. So I'll just apply it in a second. First on the regular sized one, I believe. And that's it for my yerba. Okay, 30 more minutes. Let's see if I can do the wings. I mean, I won't paint them, but I will just base coat them, which will be good enough. Because that will set me up in a position where I can. Because I may, actually, what I may do before the next stream, just finish the small version and focus only on the large version. Well, I'll see. Depends on how much time I need to do that now. So I will just use blood red. I will use blood red from Army Painter range, from Speed Paint range, because it's the brightest of the speed paints, brightest of the reds I've used, which again sets me up for, well, maybe not success, but sets me up in a position where I know that I can modify the color. I can keep it darker or brighter. I have options. So let's do it. Let's do the wings. Let's do the wings and see how it goes. That will kind of put a nice frame to the miniature. I'm just being slow. The paint is loaded, but I'm slow because I don't want to accidentally sprinkle it onto other elements. I mean, I can still fix it, but red is a has a very strong pigment. So if it gets on other elements, it will just be hard to get rid of it. Now the same on the back. So as you can see, I'm just applying a brush full of red, and thanks to the fact that it was pre-shaded, I can just spread it evenly. You know, I may be tempted to paint this miniature offline and have something else for the next stream. I will see. But then those finishing touches can, well, they can last a couple more hours, so maybe it makes sense to hold off and paint it next time I'm streaming. I mean, I do have some decent painting backlog, so whatever I end up doing, I'm not going to lack models for painting. This is a very rich shade of red, highly saturated, and I think the more I paint, the more I'm leaning towards this type of red, where I have red on the inside, but darker, gradually going darker towards the outside, because that just looks more menacing and more suitable for an undead queen, undead fey queen. And I also need to paint the base or bases for the regular sized one, because I want to be flexible and be able to use her both as the titled version and as the OG version. Actually, when Titania originally appeared back in the second edition days, I immediately ordered her. I think she premiered at one of the Gen Cons. So I bought the box, and it was fun because all the Autumn Knights had separate names then. It was the Tooth, I believe, the Thorn, something else. And she wasn't maybe the strongest of masters, but she had some nice scheme marker manipulation, some mobility, and there were some schemes which favored her. I remember that back in the second edition there was this scheme which required you to essentially surround the model with 3 scheme markers, and Titania had this attack where she could just teleport a model, so you could set up 3 markers and teleport the target there and score 2 points. Because in the second edition you could score 2 points immediately if you fulfilled all the required conditions. So there she is. Nice and easy, quick. I can actually zoom in a little bit on her. Maybe adjust the position of the light. Actually, I can bring my lamp close and it should shed more light. Okay, there she is. Super glossy currently. And a little bit out of focus, probably due to the fact that there is just so much of color here. The Claw, the Tooth, and the Thorn. Yes, those were the names. Those are all the colors blocked on the small one. Let's do the same on the big one. And definitely in the second edition, there was one thing that Titania was missing, and that's a dinosaur. Because dinosaur is just so much fun. I mean, maybe not the best option. Sometimes just there are better options for her. Like Hooded Rider is amazing with her both versions. But there's always this temptation to put the dinosaur because, I mean, it's a steampunk Victorian setup, and you have a dinosaur. So how cool is that? And it's a massive, massive miniature. So this is going to take a bit more time. You see, I got through those wings in a matter of minutes, just 2-3 minutes. Well, maybe a bit more. And I was done. And here I will just need to take a bit more time. But what I like about the red is that I can then keep on putting darker red towards the edge, keeping it brighter towards the center. And that way I will have this kind of gritty, evil look that I'm after. Which will take me well, I would say that for this miniature I would need maybe a couple more hours. So it can probably wait until the next stream, which will be in 3 weeks' time. But I'll definitely be painting some other Malifaux stuff in between. Hey, MacBluff. Happy New Year. Happier New Year. That's very true. Yeah, dinosaur. Can't go wrong with a dinosaur. What could possibly go wrong? If it dies, you just bring it back. All you need is a 12, I believe, of any suit, and you have it back on the table. I think I've top decked bringing back Dinah at least twice. It can be disheartening. That's why, while playing Titania, it's so important to stack those focus points on those focus conditions on the snake, on the gorer, because then when it turns back into a model that was killed, it's primed for action. It probably will have some catching up to do, some walking to do to get back to the thick of things. But at least a focus or two can go a long, long way. Oh yeah, I hope it's a good one this 2023. I hope it's a more peaceful year, and I live in Central Eastern Europe, so don't need to really elaborate on that. What I mean by being more peaceful, but generally worldwide, we all need a bit more peace in this world. Peace and love, really sounds so obvious, but we never get enough of either. Never seem to get enough of either. But the year has started really well for me because yesterday my younger daughter celebrated her fifth birthday, and it was a very nice day. Of course, lots of pancakes and all the good stuff. But she got a gift that she really enjoyed, which was this large house from Lego bricks. Don't know if you guys saw the Encanto movie. I haven't, but my kids love it, so she wanted this. So we spent the afternoon building it and listening to the soundtrack to the movie. So it was and eating sweet pancakes. So yeah, thanks. Yeah, my daughter, 5-year old now, not a tiny baby anymore. Still going to kindergarten, but 2 years and she'll be well, a year and a half and she'll be in the primary school. They grow up so fast. So painting, I haven't painted miniatures with my kids. I also have an older daughter who is 7 years old now because I know they would love it. And this is my castle, right? I need to defend it. I cannot surrender it. If I invited them to paint with me, to paint miniatures, they love all the artistic stuff. They love drawing, painting. I would lose a lot of it because they would want to paint with me all the time, and they have their painting to do. I can keep my let's say hobby man cave, if you will. That's how I approach it. Well, thanks for the birthday wishes. She did enjoy a very good day. It's also beginning of the year, so things are very, very slowly ramping up at work, which is good because I can kind of ease into the year work wise without too much stress and without hitting the ground running. So, all in all, pretty good time of the year, and the weather has been just unseasonably warm in Poland. Over the Christmas, we had like 20 Celsius, which is In some areas in Poland it was 20 Celsius. It was like 18 here, which is like high, which is like 65, 70 Fahrenheit, which is ridiculous because we typically have around 0 Celsius in January, which is, I mean, cool, right? It's nice that it's warm and sunny, but it's deeply troubling that the climate is really, really changing at a rate which is alarming. We did have some heavy snowfall like a week before the Christmas, and it looked lovely, and it was cold. It was the proper winter weather, the kind of weather that causes your car to break down, which happened to me, as it seems to be happening every year. But we are expecting a return of winter towards the end of this week, so it's going to get the minus temperatures and some snowfall again. So there will be winter, at least for several days. So almost done with the base color for the wings. I think what will happen next is once it's dry, I could potentially give it a dry brush just to bring back the wonderful feather texture. And then I can start tweaking it with glazes. So brighter red towards the center, darker towards the edge, and then really pick those fine lines with bright shade of red. Because highlighting red is a bit tricky, because if you mix it with white it becomes pink, and it wouldn't fit the overall composition I have here. In some contexts it might make sense, not here. That's why I have a couple of bottles of red paint, and I just use dark red or ready-made paint for highlights or shades whenever I need to work with that color more extensively. Okay, so I guess that's Titania with base coated wings, and red works quite well with green, I think. Now I just need to look and make sure I haven't missed any spots. And I have, of course, missed some. That's not too late to fix that. I'll just need to move it around to make sure it's fully covered. The same on the smaller one. And I already see a spot that I missed here. Some paint is pooling there. Let's drag it out. And here as well. Let's clean the brush. Oh, so we love Encanto. I mean, I haven't watched that, really. I should catch up on that. I mean, Disney movies in general, they have, was it Pixar or Disney? Not sure what's the difference is. Either way, they tend to have really, really good soundtracks. And the songs are cool. I mean, I enjoy listening to them. Okay, I think that with the some of the remaining time that I have, I will start doubling with the greens. So what I want to do is I want to keep it darker, and the way I will approach it is I will use a slightly darker shade of green, which will be orc skin. I mean, the coolest song is my kids' favorite song is "We Don't Talk About Bruno." I think that's the title. They just love it. They sing it all the time. So what I'm doing now, just directly from the bottle, and I will use it to make sure that the green elements are a bit more noticeable. Not painting across along the whole surface, most of the surface. Just leaving some of that initial color visible. So painting more or less alongside it, just so that this darker shade of green works in parallel with the very bright one that I initially placed there. And that will make those parts pop up even more. I can still bring some yellow later on to give it a bit more intensity. And I will definitely bring some brown to the mix later on. It's like Poison Ivy Bikini. Has some Batman vibes. Not a big fan of Batman, but the characters are, I mean, so recognizable that I think that that's the point of reference here that a lot of people will come up with. So I'm not really covering the whole thing, just trying to make it so that part of this brighter green is still at least partly visible. There she is. And then what I will continue doing is that this vine just traces down here. See, so there is this fine line, and the rest can be brown, maybe yellow. Maybe I'll pick up all those leaves because it's essentially she's floating off of a tree, which is, I would imagine that it's like the force of nature making it grow out of the ground so fast. So you have both some plants and the tree. And from now on, it will be just a matter of identifying which elements are part of the vines, which are part of the tree, and painting them appropriately. And I could probably go on for a couple more hours, but it's getting close to midnight here. It's just a couple more minutes left in the stream tonight. And it's been such a pleasure to start this year's stream with this iconic Titania version. Maybe I will land a few brush strokes of darker green on the larger version, just so that you see how impactful it immediately becomes. And really enjoy seeing some comments in the chat as I paint. It's always a pleasure to interact with you guys. I mean, it would be just boring talking to myself, and when I can interact with you, it's just pure pleasure. And great to see some new faces in the chat as well. Both people who have been joining before. Always pleasure to see you again, and some new nicks, some new people being dragged into the amazing world of Malifaux for a good reason, because it's a great game. So keep at it, guys. There's a lot of good stuff to be gained from getting deeper into the world of Malifaux, because it's such a vast universe. Shouldn't be really holding her by the wings because the red hasn't dried fully there. Yep, that's my Instagram. Take a look around. Plenty of Malifaux stuff there. Probably around 80 to 90% of the content there is Malifaux. And that content will continue to grow because I will continue to paint onward streams, and I will continue to paint offline. Guys, make sure that tomorrow you join the same time, so 3 p.m. US time, US Georgia time, or 9 p.m. Central European time, or 8 p.m. UK time if you're from the UK. Then another word painter will be showcasing something spectacular, and I'm not going to spoil it because let's just keep the surprise until tomorrow. It's going to be Haunted's time to present something nice and keep you guys entertained. He's a good entertainer. You will, if you haven't joined any of his streams before, then make sure you do so. And I'm almost done here. Soon I will just showcase what's been painted here. Obviously it will be better visible on the larger scale model because everything is clearly visible there, more clearly visible. Just a couple minutes left here. Let me just draw a few more lines. And again, trying to make sure that I do not paint over everything that's already been painted. Okay, I think it's time to call it a night or a day. But for now, I just want to give a quick summary. So once again, today I was working on the new iconic version of Titania, which is hitting the brick and mortar stores this month. Those are the previous versions of Titania. So the first Titania and the title Titania. This is how the game scaled version looks like next to them. I would say the scale wise, it matches perfectly. And today, most of the stream was really about painting the skin. And I think it was well worth the effort because she has this undead hint to it that took like half of the stream. It was all about using wet palette and going super smooth and slow on her. And then I just adjusted, took second half of the stream mostly, just put all the base colors on her. I think I will continue in my next stream. And until then, well, thank you. Glad you enjoyed that. Yeah, and have a great 2023 as well. And enjoy getting into the game. You've chosen well. And I'll see you guys around. Take care, everyone.